So again, thank you all for joining today. On behalf of the Asian American Chamber of Commerce, I welcome you to our first webinar of 2023. I'm still getting used to saying that, 2023. First webinar of 2023, and we have an amazing speaker with us. We have our director of the OSW with the United States Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, with us, Denise Benjamin Sermons. She's our speaker today, going to tell us all about EPA, how to expand your business within EPA, and all the fun jazz that goes with doing business with the EPA. I also have my partner in crime and moderator for today, Timothy Odom. He's a vice president with Vidori. They are our sponsors today of this webinar and also members of the Asian American Chamber of Commerce. If you all are not members yet, we encourage you to join. It's not expensive, and you get a ton of networking and learning opportunities through the chamber. So a quick spiel on our chamber. I am the chair for our GovCon committee. We are all volunteer board members. The chamber is designed, and the purpose is to improve economic development of Asian Pacific American owned businesses, but really over the past few years, that has not been a priority. We want to improve and develop all American businesses. And while we primarily serve the Washington metro area, DC metro area, we have members across the country. So I hope you take advantage of all the benefits that the membership has to offer you. Consider joining our chamber. And with that, I'm not going to take up too much of your time. I'm going to bring on Tim Odom, Vice President of Vidori, to introduce himself, tell us a little bit about your company, and then we'll bring on our speaker for today, why you're all here. And before I hand it off, Tim, sorry, housekeeping, we are recording this session. Everyone will get a copy of this recording. So please don't ask that in the Q&A of whether we are recording and will you get a copy. We are recording. We will be sending out a link to the recording. So you don't have to take notes. You can pay attention to our speaker and actively listen, ask questions in the Q&A box. Please network with each other in the chat box, but we are unable to provide you any transcripts of any conversation that happens in the chat box. So if you meet someone, you want to reach out to them afterwards, please make sure you jot down their contact information. We are unable to provide transcripts to anyone anything that happens in the chat function. So with that, Tim, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Rena. I appreciate it. And good afternoon to all in attendance. I really appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this discussion. As Rena mentioned, my name is Timothy Odom. I'm the Vice President of Marketing and Portfolio Engagement for Vidori. As a company, Vidori, we're an IT firm. We focus on using technology to solve problems of business and government. We have 4 key areas that we focus on as a company, which is integration and test, data management, cybersecurity, and cloud native projects. From a portfolio standpoint, expands the federal government, commercial, and most recently, we added healthcare agencies doing some work that we did during the pandemic to help hospitals with intelligent dashboards and be able to provide a quick turnaround there. We're also quite proud of our recent federal accomplishment. We have a performance testing software that we developed in-house, which is called VPT. The US Census actually purchased VPT as part of its suite of making sure it was ready for the 2020 census, which was quite a unique census because of the pandemic. There were over 180 million households collecting all the census data within 3 months, and there were no major issues. So we were quite happy to be on the back end of that effort to make sure that that went without a glitch for the citizens as they turned in their data. Of course, like all companies, we enjoy partnering with organizations that accent our capabilities. So one of the things we look for is the ability to complement the work that we're doing right now. We're actively paying attention to organizations that may have experience in AI, machine learning capabilities. We're definitely interested in having more conversation. And as we expand, obviously the field of cyber is such a large field that we are always looking for really good partners in that field that can also complement some of our capabilities. But circling back to, as Rena mentioned, while we're here for today, a lot of our work is federal government based. And the way we were able to really acquire that work and get our contracts was actually by using insights like we'll receive today. We attended a lot of these very same seminars. We continue to do so, and getting the insight and the real angles that are provided by organizations like the EPA. So they're so invaluable. They really help a small business to understand how to best position itself. So with that being said, I'd like to turn our attention to the speaker for today, Denise Benjamin Sermons, Director of the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization, OSTBU for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency.
Greetings. Well, thank you very much, Tim, for that handoff. And great to hear that you found these types of sessions invaluable as you all were developing your own federal government business. Well, as Tim mentioned, my name is Denise Benjamin Sermons. I serve as the Director of the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. I am thrilled to be able to join you all. We have a nice intimate group of 67. I hope you'll appreciate the information that I have to share with you. While they're pulling up the slides that I'll be presenting from, let me just extend my sincere thanks for the invitation, the Asian American Chamber of Commerce, for including us in this very first event of this calendar year. How exciting that you're kicking it off with EPA. We do great work and we have a lot of business, so that's great. And I also want to extend my thanks to Tim for his sponsorship and for moderating today's discussion. Well, next slide. What we will talk about is doing business with EPA as a way of growing your business. It's really critical. We can stay on this slide. I have to let you guys know that there could not be a better time to do business with EPA. As we'll talk about a little bit more, a lot of the work that we're doing is really at the forefront of the president's management agenda. And that's actually reflected in the additional appropriations that we're seeing as an agency. So we have historic numbers of budgets and appropriations that you'll see will lend themselves to primarily grants, but also contract work. And so paying attention to where those appropriations are going and what type of transformative work they're doing will help position your business to take advantage of these new opportunities. So to get us where we need to be with the information that I'd like to share, we'll start off with just a quick overview to give you a sense of who we are as an agency. We'll talk a little bit about our spend profile so you have a sense of where those contracting dollars are going and where they've gone in the past. I'll give you just a little bit of insight on what some of the upcoming opportunities are that you may want to pay attention to. And then finally, share some resources with you as you move forward to penetrate the EPA ranks. All right, so let's get started with the next slide on the agency overview. This is actually really critical because as you do your homework, you want to understand the agency that you will potentially market with to ensure that they have sufficient business that will provide the return on the investment that you will do in marketing yourself to that agency. So here's the story with respect to EPA. Our mission is to protect human health and the environment. And it's a really critical mission that you'll find a lot of the folks, virtually all of the folks at EPA, are really aligned around. We really consider ourselves to be a mission-oriented agency, and to accomplish our good work in protecting our air, land, and water, you see a lot of collaboration in our agency. So sometimes things may take longer to the extent that we want to really bring in all of the internal and external stakeholders. But I got to tell you, the end product is always far superior because of that collaboration. The other thing, just in terms of understanding the culture of the agency as we look to achieve the agency mission, is that we have a lot of scientists at the agency. In fact, comparatively speaking with some of the other federal government agencies, you'll see that we have a high concentration of scientists. And so what that means as you're looking to market to EPA is you really want to come with the data and the facts to the maximum extent possible so that you're speaking the language that a lot of the agency personnel understand. So that's our mission. A little bit about our structure. We have 13 headquarters program offices, and I'll give you a sense of what they are in a few minutes. We also have 10 regional offices, like many of the federal agencies across the government. Unique to us as a science-based agency, and so we have this in common with some of the other science-based agencies, is that we also do have some research centers and we have laboratories. Now, our workforce is really in a state of transition. Currently, we have about 14,500 employees. And with all of the new appropriations we've received, you can bet that we're ramping up. And so you will be seeing larger numbers over the next several years, 2 years precisely. And so while we're considered a mid-size agency in terms of our size and number of employees, we are going to be growing to ensure that we're effectively implementing and managing those additional appropriations that we've seen over the last year. All right, so let's talk about what that budget looks like. This is really important and exciting for our agency as we seek to achieve our mission, but also for you all as business owners because of the opportunities that the budget opens up for you. So on average in the past, EPA's overall appropriations really were about $9 billion, which again puts us in that mid-range for federal agencies. As you all know, if you're paying close attention to the media, we just did receive our appropriations for fiscal year 2023, and that appropriations was $10.1 billion. And it's higher than what we've received in the past, and it's actually, well, it's higher than what we've received in the past. And so that's good news for us. 10.1, and we're in the process of putting the operating plan together to get all of those dollars allocated to the respective EPA account. But above and beyond that 10.1 billion, which as I mentioned is higher than average, we've had some really phenomenal additional appropriations that you can understand is really necessitating the ramping up of employees that I talked about previously and opening up opportunities for businesses. So the first big one that we received was the infrastructure appropriations, affectionately referred to as BILL. And under that particular category of appropriations over the next 5 years, we have $60 billion. Now that is an incredibly high amount as compared to what the agency has received in the past. And again, it's on top of our annual appropriations. And since BILL, last year, we also received a share of the infrastructure reduction appropriations to the tune of $40 billion. So these are a lot of dollars that EPA is preparing to obligate and to utilize for our program. And so we are excited about the opportunities, as I mentioned, and are working to make sure that we are good stewards in administering the implementation of the programs using those funds. So in terms of what the contract spend has looked like, in the past, we've really been around 1.6 billion for the last, I would say, 10 years, just around that number. Sometimes we've dipped a little lower, to as low as 1.4 billion. And sometimes we've just been a little higher at about 1.7. But this past fiscal year 2022 that we just completed, we went up as high as 1.9 billion. And that's because some of those BILL funds are beginning to be obligated both in terms of financial assistance awards for grants, as well as for contracts. And for financial assistance, usually we're about several billion above what we do for contracting. We do a lot of grants and cooperative agreements, and that average over the last 5 or so years has been 4 billion, but that will increase significantly going forward. So that's who we are as an agency. Let's take a look at how we're structured on the next slide. I mentioned we have 13 program offices. We have a brand new one that was launched. Actually, I'm forgetting whether it was in December. Yeah, it was in December of 2022. We had a big launch, and this aligns with the president's management agenda, and it also aligns with EPA's strategic plan, which focuses on environmental justice and the companion program of external civil rights. And so we just in December created an entire new program office that centers around those cross-cutting issues. And I share the names of the program offices because you all, as you're looking to market to EPA, you're going to want to see which are the program offices that are good candidates for the type of work that you do. So if you're a support function, you might want to look at targeting the Office of General Counsel, which is a cross-cutting support function, the Office of Inspector General, those types of offices, the Office of the Chief Financial Officer, for example, or our Office of Mission Support, which encompasses IT, HR, and some of those other support areas. But perhaps if you're more media specific and you do research or construction, you might want to look at which of those program offices are really house those type of work for the agency. All right, well, let's take a look at what our regions look like on the next slide. We have 10 regions, as I mentioned, and so what's listed on this slide, and I'm sure you all will have access to the slides, are where the regional offices are located, and also the states that are within the regional office portfolio. So again, 10, many on the East Coast and a few on the West Coast as well. Next slide. So that's what we look like as an agency as a whole. I just wanted to give you a sense of who we are as your advocate in the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization, often referred to as OSDBU. We are a little different from some of the other federal agency OSDBUs. We have 3 teams that work together as part of the OSDBU umbrella. The administrative and resource team obviously is not relevant for your purposes, but it does kind of help us with some of the administrative responsibilities that we have to ensure that we comply with. But what's different is that second box on the second layer. And what that box indicates is that we have what's called an asbestos and small business ombudsman. Now, this particular function is more media centric, and what it seeks to do is to advocate and support small businesses to ensure and improve their performance for complying with environmental regulation, as well as their overall environmental performance. And we also work to make sure that as the agency promulgates regulations, that we minimize the burden that they place on small businesses. So that's one piece of our office. The second piece, which you're sure you're most interested, is what we refer to as our Small Business Solutions and Opportunities team. And that's the team that really provides national guidance, counsel, and advocacy on your behalf for small business contracting opportunities. All right, so let's move on to the next slide. Just checking my time here. Wanted to give you all a sense of what the spend looks like. We talked a little bit about the overall spend for contracts and grants, financial assistance, 1.9 for contracts. And just to give you a flavor of what we look like for our small business spend, what you see on this slide is that we are continuing to improve and increase the share of small business dollars in EPA's overall spend. For fiscal year 21, the last year for which we have completed federal procurement data, as the data for fiscal year 22 is still provisional. It still has to go through a quality assurance. We awarded more than $658.8 million for small businesses, which equates to almost 48%. Actually, over 48% of our total dollars went to small business. That is a pretty significant amount. So let's take a look at our goaling requirements. If we move on to the next slide, you're all aware that the law requires that each federal agency is responsible for providing the maximum practicable opportunities for small businesses. And on the next slide, we'll see what our achievements are for the goals that are assigned to the different small business subcontracting, small business subcategories to see if we're meeting the goals. So I'm not seeing the slide change on my end. I'm not sure if you all are seeing it, but what's on the next slide is how well we have an agency have done in meeting those goals for each of the 5 categories of small businesses. Are we able to advance the slide? There we go. Thank you very much.
Apologize, I got the blue wheel of death here.
No worries. I'm glad we were able to pull it up. Thank you very much. So here's the point that I want to make with this slide. What we show you is the goal achievements for fiscal year 21. And in green, you'll see what our actual achievements are with the blue bar. And on the orange bar, you'll see what the goal is. And the achievements numbers are all in green because we not only met, but we exceeded all of our 5 goals for small businesses. This is a big deal because this is the first time we've ever done that as an agency. I will say that we're one of a handful of agencies that has received an A score on the SBA scorecard for the last 12 years. But this is the first time we got an A+, and that's because we continue to be committed to small business opportunities, and we continue to work together collectively as an agency to make sure that commitment is realized in real terms, in terms of dollars going to small businesses. Last year, fiscal year 22, we did not fare as well. We blew the small business overall number out of the water, but for the separate subcategories for socioeconomic businesses, we did not achieve as many of the goals, and that was as a result of the bill funds in large part that we received, and there were some priorities for getting those dollars out quickly that impacted our ability to target small businesses. But we have strategies in place now, so we're looking forward to doing even better this fiscal year. Next slide, please. So what we're going to get into with the next slide are some categories that I think that you all would be interested in. So in terms of what we spend on, what this slide shows is the top spend categories for EPA. Like a lot of the agency, IT is prominently featured because we all rely on our IT. So lots of opportunities historically in that area. Professional services is a real generic one, and you can see what's listed under there. And so there are opportunities there as well. And construction and research and development. One quick note about IT, which is a popular area for small businesses. Ordinarily, that's where EPA has done a significant amount of its small business contracting in the past. Moving forward, we're monitoring this closely because EPA has adopted a little bit of a different approach for its IT service delivery. In the past, it was very decentralized. We're moving more to a centralized approach with significant large contracts that consolidated a lot of the work. And I believe that that's going to have an impact on the small business opportunities on the prime level that are available going forward. There will certainly be more opportunities on the subcontracting level, but we're looking to see very closely how that will impact the prime opportunities for small and socioeconomic businesses. Okay, next slide. As I check the time. So I believe the next slide, once we get there, we'll look at, I probably need to wait till we get that to make sure that it does. And I'm so sorry that we're having some issues with the slide. I apologize.
Me too. I'm sorry about that. I'm
I
trying.
know. I'm
like,
apologizing
go
for
for
you because I know it's tough. And
Yeah.
I don't have a hard copy here, so I can cheat and look and see what the next slide is. There we are. Okay, so I think this is really helpful information for you all, because you want to be strategic as you're looking to market your wares. So who's spending the money? And where is that money going? What type of work? So in answer to that first question is who's spending the most money in all of our organization? This information answers that question. And so we see ORD is at the Office of Research and Development is at the top of the list as of fiscal year 2021, spending the most dollars. And for the regions, region 2 is pretty far up the list. And so here's what I'll tell you about what you can know about these offices that are the top spenders for the agency. The Office of Research and Development and the Office of Mission Support, as well as Region 7, are one of our top spenders for small businesses. So these are really small business friendly organizations for you all to consider, meaning that they really understand how to do small business contracting, and they've kind of perfected their practices in attracting small businesses for their work. But what it also means is some of the other top spenders that are listed here, they're prime for opportunities for you all to market, because they're really trying to increase their small business numbers as well. So you also want to make sure that you're flagging these organizations for ways to identify the solutions you offer that they can utilize to help increase their small business goal achievements. All right, well, let's take a chance and see if we can get to the next slide. Great. Just
Seems
a
to be
quick
working
word.
now.
It's working, and I love you for it. Thank you. Just a quick word on category management, because we know that is a big priority and for the federal government as a whole. It's been for the last several years and continues to be. And hopefully you all are familiar with the whole category management, which is essentially just making sure that the government is leveraging our spend so that we are spending more efficiently and most cost effectively as well. So to let you know, in terms of whether we're using some of those best in class versus government-wide agency vehicles, which are at the top of the list for good practices in category management, or focusing just on the agency-wide contracts, which are what's considered still preferred, but less preferred than the other two higher tiers. And what this slide shows is still the majority of our spend is with respect to agency-wide contracts, which means we have a number of contracts in place and we're issuing task orders against those agency contracts. But we also do a lot of business with GSA, as everyone does. And so that's second, and that's considered a tier 2 category management area. And then we also use other agency vehicles such as GWACs, the government-wide acquisition vehicles, and then also open market, where they're just brand new standalone or local contracts is the least amount. All right, next slide. All right, so we're starting to get into tools a little bit for you all, resources to use. The biggest one that you need to be familiar with all of the agencies that you're targeted to do business with is the acquisition forecast. Each agency is required by law to publish opportunities that are coming up over the next few years that are over the simplified acquisition threshold of $250. Each agency houses its forecast database in different ways. We have ours on EPA's website, and you can just go to EPA.gov and do a quick search for forecast, and you'll pull that up. So that's a really good tool for you all to utilize in seeing what's coming down the pike. And we're getting ready to launch our forecast process for 24 through 26. In fact, I'm going to be issuing a memo together with the senior procurement executive next week that will get the programs and regions started in projecting their forecast. They're projecting their acquisitions, and we hope to have the revised forecast up by July the 1st. So look out for that new one, but in the interim, continue to look to see what's coming down the pike. The other big tool that's incredibly helpful is what we provide at EPA, but not at a lot of other agencies, is a list of our active contracts. And you can find that also on EPA.gov, and the information where you can connect to that is listed on that slide. What's good about this database is, one, you know what we're buying, you know who's buying it, but you also know when the contracts are coming due so that you can start positioning yourself for the recompete. Also, what's helpful in using this active contracts database is, especially for the new contracts that were awarded, you can also see if potentially there may be some subcontracting opportunities for some of these contracts. So we list who the awardee is, and so you can reach out to the awardee and see what subcontracting or other teaming arrangement opportunities are available. All right, next slide. So we're heading into the home stretch here, but I wanted to give you guys a flavor of what our acquisition forecast database currently looks like. And so this slide provides you with what the numbers are for the current one in place. And so it indicates that we have a total of 145 actions that are forecasted for this fiscal year and 72 for 24. And then it just kind of gives you a flavor of what's designated as the planned method and targeted business for those acquisitions. Now, the important thing to note is that this is just a forecast. It's projected. It's being updated regularly, but things can change. And so if you see something that may be good for your business and it's designated as just a small business opportunity, and you're a hub zone business as an example, you might want to reach out to us and let us know, hey, we do work in this area. So as you guys are structuring this procurement, please know that there's potential that you guys can set it aside for a hub zone because there are a few of us out there. So that's just ways that you can utilize the acquisition forecast. Next slide, please. Another thing that I provide here is, in addition to using the acquisition forecast, I just wanted to give you a sense of some more live and potentially about to be active procurements. And so we kind of took a look at what the sources that sought notices were that we issued recently. And so those are listed on this slide and on the next slide. So you can see where we're trying to find out who the businesses are. And some of these may have since expired since this slide was last prepared, but that means that all that means is that although you may not be able to respond to the notice, you can look out for the actual procurement that may be coming out, or perhaps call and ask questions on where it is in the queue. All right, next slide. Finally, in terms of some resources for you all to consider, in addition to the acquisition forecast, the active contracts list, we also have a kind of revived and reinvented small business vendor database, and we're really experimenting on how we're going to be using this. And so what we encourage you all businesses to do is to access the database and register your business on it. What we would like to be able to do is use it as a market research tool for our contracting officials, as well as for us in OSDBU, to identify businesses that we'd like to target for procurements as they become live. The other thing is we certainly utilize it to the extent that we're hosting different events, outreach activities, industry days, and we send some of our marketing material and communications directly to those businesses registered on the website, because we really see it as those businesses that are interested in doing business with us. And so we really want to bring them in the fold and make sure that they get relevant information about what we're doing on the contracting front. And then finally, we have a companion small business vendor calendar that you can find on that link, which will tell you what some of those upcoming activities are. Next slide. And the last thing, and this should really be the last resource after you've exhausted all of those other ones, is one-on-one meetings with my office. We are always happy to meet with small businesses and provide counseling and help to match them up with work. But as you can imagine, we're very busy, as all OSDBUs are. So what's critical for you to make the most of an opportunity to meet with us in OSDBU is to do your homework. And so you're going to want to look at the forecast. You're going to want to look at the active contracts list. You want to familiarize yourself with the program offices so we can help you to identify potential opportunities that are appropriate for your business. So do your homework first. And when you have specific information that you want to share with us so we can provide some more advice, counsel, and advocacy, go ahead and request a meeting with us. And that's a link to the address, the email address that you can request it. And you'll find we have a form for you to complete so we can make sure we can have the right players at the meeting. So just information about your business and the purpose of the meeting, that sort of thing. All right, I think we're moving on to the final slide. And so this is where you can find OSDBU. Remember, we are your liaison. We take our role very seriously. We want to be sure that we're helping you find those opportunities. So you can use that email address. There's also a general number that you can call and reach us also through that internet site. So that's essentially who we are as an agency, as an OSDBU, and what we do and how we can support you. I hope you find this information helpful. We have some time for questions, so I'm happy to turn it over to Tim to help us navigate through those questions.
Well, while Tim is getting organized, I'm going to just say, of all the presentations, and I hope none of the other OSDBUs listen to this, because they would be upset with me, but when we met with you and we said, this is what we want, you hit everything on the head. So thank you. Thank you for you actually took away half my questions. I had come prepared. But Tim, over to you and let you moderate.
Thank you so much.
Those are more important.
No, absolutely, Rena. I was thinking the same. Thank you again, Denise. That was very informative, and it was very clear to follow. And I think we have some questions that just may highlight some of the things that that I think you've touched on most of it, Denise. But I'll start with one of the questions that came through. There were a few about set-asides. How is EPA favorable towards like veteran-owned SDVOSB set-asides, 8A set-asides? Is that a common practice within EPA?
Yeah, it's a great question and it's an important one. And so by law, agencies are required to set aside or consider small businesses and set aside for all acquisitions under 250,000 and over. They should first focus on socioeconomic businesses and then small businesses. So that's what the regulations say, and we take it seriously in applying it. And so we always advocate for setting aside, and we look first at where we are in our achievement levels. And if we're low on women-owned small businesses, if we're low on service-disabled veteran businesses, we'll look there first. But ultimately, we really just try to make sure that we're providing a more limited competition opportunity for small businesses so they are not competing with those large businesses that sometimes result in an unleveled playing field. So yeah, that's what we're pushing for. Set asides, socioeconomic businesses first, based on also our goal achievement level.
Thank you. And I think
Before we
you
go
said-
to the next question,
Oh,
Tim,
okay.
sorry, I just want to remind the audience, we are not going to unmute anyone's line. So please do not raise your hand. Submit your question in the Q&A box and we'll get to it. Please do not raise your hand. We are not going to unmute audience lines. Thank you. Go ahead, Tim.
Thank you, Reina. So, I think, Denise, that question leads into another question, because you talked about the categories as we were going along, and potentially that some of those will be larger opportunities. So I think that sparked a couple of questions around, will EPA be monitoring the larger companies to ensure they meet their small business spend as part of their solutions?
Oh, another great question, and thank you for asking it. This is at the forefront of my mind. We've been doing some good work on the prime contracting level, but we understand that there are also opportunities on the subcontracting level. And there is a small business subcontracting program that relies extensively on prime contractors, large primes, to do their part. And unfortunately, I think this is one of the weakest links in EPA's small business program, as well as for the federal government as a whole. And so this is what we're going to be focusing on going forward, is how to hold those primes accountable for their small business subcontracting plan goal achievements. And one of the things that we're going to be launching this year is opportunities that will connect those large primes with small businesses in the area that EPA does a lot of large prime work, so that there can't be any excuse that they can't find the small businesses, which is what we hear a lot. The other thing that we're going to be focusing on is to make sure that they're reporting, and they're reporting adequately. And then we are prepared as necessary that if they're not meeting their goals, we're going to be doing some audits to find out why that is, and where appropriate. We never like to do this, but that's the only way to hold their feet to the fire, where they're not meeting in good faith their small business subcontracting plans. We're prepared to assess liquidated damages.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Denise. Another question that comes up is this related to, you showed a chart that gave some of the historical spend. Do you anticipate, and I know you mentioned you're working currently on the 24 budget, do you anticipate that spend to continue with the allocation as it is across the next couple of years?
I think the potential is for it to grow. So it's going to be larger in terms of dollars. And based on a lot of the measures we're putting in place, we think the small business share will increase as well. Because what we're focusing on doing is making it easier to identify those small business solutions and sources. So the contracting officials don't have to do all of that work. We'll do it for them ahead of the time, anticipating where the contract spend will be. And so that'll make it easier for them to provide those opportunities for small businesses. So we're seeing more dollars going to small businesses, and we're seeing a larger share as well.
If I can
Now-
piggyback on that question, sorry, Tim, I'm going to piggyback on that question. If the small businesses see procurement out there, or an announcement or solicitation out there that clearly could have been broken out into smaller pieces, but it was bundled for whatever reason, what advice do you give? How do companies then make you aware of such solicitations? I know it's probably too late by the time the RFP has come out to make any changes, but sometimes that happens. And I'll give you an example. We have a lot of companies who do the more design engineering side, but then they are forced to work with general contractors because those requirements are bundled. Whereas the design, interior design, or the design portion could have been small business, and the actual implementation could be large, full and open. What advice do you have for companies? How do they make you aware of such bundled opportunities?
Thank you for that question, because bundling continues to be one of the biggest challenges that all agencies are facing. It's tough because bundling is so convenient for programs and contracting officials. The problem is that they're fatal for small business opportunities. And so we really have to address it. And partnering with the small business community in identifying when bundling occurs, I think is critical. So we're doing it internally as we're reviewing acquisitions before the solicitation is actually issued. But sometimes small businesses have insider information that we don't know. And so when you're seeing sources sought notices, you want to respond to them. Firstly, to let them know that you're out there, so you can increase our leverage in advocating for small business set aside. Or if you see that it's too large and they need to cut some of it out, carve out some for small businesses, let us know. Send us, we saw this sources sought, just send a communication and email directly to EPA. We think that's way too large. They need to unbundle it or reduce the consolidation if it's technically not a bundling. That's the kind of information we need so we can address it as well. Now, one quick thing you mentioned, if the RFP comes out, it's too late. It's harder, but it's not impossible. So if for whatever reason we missed it as a bundled procurement, or if we agree that there was a justification for bundling and you see something that's off, let us know, because we could require, depending on what you're telling us, the agency to go back to the drawing board and restructure that acquisition. So I will say the earlier the better, but anytime you see it, please do bring it to OSDBU's attention, because there still may be some tools in our toolkit we can use to change.
Perfect. Thank you for that. And I do want to remind the audience then that don't simply send an email and say, I don't like it, so unbundle it. Please be very specific, read the solicitation, the PWS, and provide direct and clear opinions. I'm going to call them opinions of what part of the solicitation you think should be unbundled, so that, you know, we don't want EPA's mailbox to be filled up with emails that they eventually start ignoring.
Excellent
thank you.
advice. Yeah, great suggestion. Thank you.
So Denise had a question. There was one that was submitted beforehand, and several were asking. I think you've touched on how to look for your service category, and I think that's in the slide deck. But what if you have a product that you think would be useful to EPA, but there's no solicitation for it? What would a company do to then market that product to EPA if there's not a direct solicitation or sources sought, et cetera?
Okay, so I didn't hear all of the question because your volume went down a bit, or it could be my aging ears, but
Let me ask again. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you a little better.
That better? Okay.
Thank
So,
you.
The question was,
no, I think I got it.
you got it?
So,
Okay, okay.
yeah, I think if there's not a specific solicitation and you have a product that you think might be helpful based on what you've read about what the agency is doing. So there are two ways. You can request a meeting with the particular program through our office, and we'll set that up, you know, after we screen to make sure that it makes sense, and you can meet with them. And sometimes the agency doesn't know what it needs until someone tells it that this is out there and this might be something helpful. And so that would help in the requirement development. The other way is through the unsolicited proposal process. So if you have a solution that's completely new, innovative, novel, you can actually submit an unsolicited proposal to the agency. And we have a standard process that we follow in determining whether it is truly a new, novel, and innovative. And there's a possibility that it could be awarded as a sole source. There's specific regulations that govern that process, so we have to follow it. But that's another option that's available. It's a high bar, but it's been done.
okay, thank you. Now, just switching back to some questions around experience. So if you have federal experience, particularly maybe in another agency, but no EPA experience, how heavily does EPA weigh having EPA specific experience in responses versus just responding, even if you just have federal experience in other agencies?
I think what's helpful is experience, period. And the experience should be specific to the nature of the work being procured or the service. There really isn't and should not be a requirement for EPA specific experience unless there's something unique about what we're asking. And so it could be a particular lab and that is a minimum need that is necessary for this particular work. But those are the types of things that we in OSDBU scrutinize to make sure that the contracting and program officials are not asking for more than they actually need. So there's the unintended consequence of eliminating businesses that can actually perform the core work. So we look to make sure that the requirements are reasonable, but it would be rare where specific EPA experience would be required. That being said, let's be honest, sometimes folks have an internal bias that if they know somebody like the incumbent has worked with EPA and done this before, that somehow they have a superior experience, but we always try to combat that. And then the last point I want to make on that is a new initiative that EPA launched last year, and that's blind proposals. And so what the agency is now requiring is that the offerers do not identify they can't identify the names of the company, but when the panel is reviewing it, that information is redacted. And so there's not the obvious ability to favor a large or better known company because they're not specifically identified in the proposal.
Okay, thank you for that. And I'm going to do a check, Rena, on time. Are we still good?
We're still good. We have a few more minutes, so we're
Okay,
not letting
fantastic.
Denise go just yet.
Okay, good. So Denise, we have a question here that's asking, what is the difference between the Office of Information Technology Operations and the Information Technology Acquisition Division?
Sure. So the Office of Mission Support, which is where the Office of Environmental Information is housed, is a new creation that was formed 2 years ago. So the Office of Information Technology used to be a separate program office, but it was combined to be part of the Office of Mission Support. And that office is responsible for the actual IT support and service to the agency. The Office of IT Acquisition is an acquisition shop that was created to provide and meet the procurement needs for the IT operations office. And so because IT buys are so complicated, we thought it made sense to have some contracting officials with expertise in that particular area. And they all reside in the acquisition IT office.
Okay, thank you.
So
for
if
that.
someone's interested in marketing to EPA to provide IT work, we would acquaint them with both groups, but beginning mostly with the program folks, because they're the ones that have the need that the Office of Acquisitions for IT helps them to meet through a contract.
Okay, thank you for that.
And if I can piggyback on that question, how often, Denise, does your office actually introduce contractors to the program office? Because that's a big complaint that we hear from small businesses is, hey, I can't talk to the person who actually has a need. I need more information or I want to understand more, but rightfully the program office cannot just sit there and meet with all the companies. So there's this back and forth that happens. And then we hear, well, the small business office is not giving me the names of the program office. How does EPA OSDBU office work differently in terms of introducing contractors to program offices?
Great question. And I'm a big proponent of vendor engagement because that's the best way to understand the capacities of businesses. So it's a win for us, but also understanding what the small businesses get to meet and talk with the program officials. They're making those connections and better positioning themselves to be competitive. So I'm always pushing it. So the big thing that we introduced to try and reorient the agency's way of doing business is I established a metric for vendor engagement where I require the programs to do a certain amount of vendor engagements each year. And I'm reporting monthly on their compliance with that metric. It's pretty lame. It's not very onerous. This is the second year, but we're just getting the engagement under their belt. The final thing I will say is that OSDBU really does serve as the gatekeepers. And so we don't want to waste the program's time. Otherwise, they're not going to be willing to meet with businesses and we'll all be heard. And so we really do try and do a little bit of screening to make sure that the business is ready, so that if they're going to be encumbering the time of these very busy officials, it will be worth both of their while.
Excellent. Tim, we have time for one more question. Or two.
Okay.
You have one and then I have one.
I'm gonna do a sub question because I'm sure some may be asking. The vendor engagement metrics, Denise, is that public that can be shared, or is it just internal?
It's an internal metric. If I tell you guys, you're going to say that's ridiculous. It's so incredibly low, and it is low because I don't want it to be a turnoff, but I want to bring them along gradually. So it's an internal metric that they are definitely taking seriously.
Okay, and Rena, now the real question, the final one from the Q&A that I see here is, DOD is beginning to look at employee-owned firms as a small business category. Has EPA considered evaluating employee-owned firms separately?
We have not, and I'm not aware of any effort in that regard.
Okay, thank you.
So that
Over
should
to
be
you.
my question. I'm not aware that we are, but if I hear anything otherwise, I'll let the Asian American Chamber of Commerce know.
Thank you. We appreciate that. And I'm going to have you wrap it up for us with the last final question. If you had to put a message for small businesses on a billboard to to say, do not do this or do more of this, what would that message be? What can you tell the small businesses on how can they succeed in doing business with the EPA?
I think the bottom line is be prepared. Be prepared in your competition for opportunities so that you can be competitive, but be prepared if you're awarded one of those opportunities, because it could be detrimental if you're not successful. And I just had a meeting yesterday afternoon with a program that has had a string of disasters with small businesses, and the bad taste it leaves in their mouth is, I think, harmful for the entire program. So do your homework when you're preparing to compete so that you can present the best possible proposal, understanding the proposal. And if and when you get that award, do your best. And if you're having issues, raise them immediately. Come to us. We will be your ally and assist you. But do your best that you're not failing so that it results in a fail for all that we're trying to accomplish.
Thank you. Well said. And I'll just wrap it up with a remark or a reminder of the remark you made very early in your presentation is, before you start marketing to the EPA, make sure you have done your homework and know that there is return on investment for your business. Not because EPA has $40 billion to spend, but do you have what the EPA needs, or any agency? And so thank you so much, Denise, for your time today, Tim, for being an excellent moderator, and our audience for participating. We truly appreciate your time and look forward to having you back on again.
Thank you very much. Good luck, everybody. Hope to see you in the future. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.